Welcome to Books on Point. In the book Beyond Bitcoin, authors Stephen Sidley and Simon Dingle argue that DeFi, which enables all manner of financial transactions to take place directly, person to person, without the involvement of financial institutions, will redesign the cogs and wheels in the engines of trust and make the remarkable rise of Bitcoin look quaint by comparison. They're joining us now to talk about this in depth. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Simon, let's start off with you. We've had you on the show before talking about your book, In Math We Trust. What inspired you to come together with Stephen and put this book together?
Thanks, Natasha. It's good to be back on the show. It was actually Stephen that inspired me. He had the original idea for the book, really looking at what's happened in the years since my original book, which you mentioned, In Math We Trust, which really looked at the rise of Bitcoin, the rise of cryptocurrency more generally, building on what I'd learned in the industry since working with it, since 2011 until today. But really what my book didn't cover, because it hadn't happened yet, is the rise of decentralized finance and all of the amazing things that are being built using this new monetary technology that we have. And so Stephen came to me a couple of years ago and said, we really need to do something that captures this new movement because it's going to be massive. It's going to potentially be bigger than Bitcoin itself. Let's do a book on it, which I thought was a fantastic idea. So that was how we got going.
Stephen, let me come to you here. And as Simon rightly describes it, this new movement, do you find that people are finally wrapping their heads around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, never mind the idea around decentralized finance?
Yeah, the adoption of Bitcoin has been growing exponentially, particularly over the last few years. I think there are now about 200 million citizens of the world who have some sort of exposure to cryptocurrency. There will be about 50 million Americans by the end of this year. South Africa makes up 7% of all Bitcoin transactions in the world. As people get over their fear and their distrust of cryptocurrency, you're going to see adoption accelerating. In the world of DeFi, which is beyond the cryptocurrencies, almost nobody had heard of it about 2 years ago, but it has burst upon the stage in this big explosion of innovation over the last 2 years, and it has started to threaten the banks and central banks. So you're seeing a lot of attention focused on decentralized finance, known as DeFi.
Right. Simon, let's get to you. When it comes to the idea of where banks fit in around decentralized finance, I mean, you go through traditional finance and where you believe that, I suppose, traditional finance mechanisms will be, transformed as a result of decentralized finance. In putting this book together, what have you and Stephen learned about where the financial institutions are right now when it comes to this idea of decentralized finance?
So it's still so early in the industry, and I think where a lot of them are is figuring out what this means for them and what they should do about it. Because these are smart people who work in finance, when they see what's happening in decentralized finance, it makes sense to them almost immediately in a way that I think most normal people just using cryptocurrency and trying to understand it, it takes a while for them to see the significance. But really, financial institutions aren't going away. That isn't the premise of our book, but they're being forced to fundamentally change. So, the title of our book is Beyond Bitcoin, Decentralized Finance and the End of Banks. If we had called it Decentralized Finance and the End of Banking as you know it, but it's more complicated than that, probably nobody would buy the book because that's not very catchy. But that's really the sentiment we're trying to convey, is that we are always going to have intermediaries. While you can do the stuff without them, they're optional now, and a lot of people have learned enough technically to be able to do this stuff without needing intermediaries and financial institutions. The reality is that most people don't have the time and the telemetry to get their head around the technology and do this themselves. They're going to want to speak to somebody. They're going to want a bank on their side. So we think the financial institutions need to change. We think that the ones that dig in their heels and resist this change won't be around in 10 or 20 years' time, much like technology companies that fought movements like open source and Linux 20 years ago and aren't around today, versus companies like Microsoft that adopted it and still are. Financial institutions need to get the right help, need to understand what's happening, get their head around what their customers want. And I think the other important thing to mention is that regulators need to enable them getting involved in this space, because that's the missing piece, I think, for existing financial institutions, is that they don't have a regulatory framework to operate within yet.
Stephen, is that then the issue, that regulation hasn't been able to keep up with this pace of innovation and change that we are seeing, especially when it comes to disrupting what we believe is the idea of money?
Yes, absolutely. Regulation moves at the speed of regulation, which is sometimes decades long to change laws or to promulgate laws. And the internet innovation moves well at the speed of internet innovation. So you have new fantastic projects, hundreds of them, that have grown up in the last 12 months. And you have regulation which has been completely off guard. So you find that there is regulatory chaos around the world right now. And as that begins to settle, you will see this thing getting adopted with increasing speed.
Let me stay with you, Stephen, on this one. Is there then scope to collaborate and incorporate? I mean, as Simon said, that, banks will still be around, perhaps not in the way that we imagine them right now, but they might change. Is there scope for them to collaborate with those who are leading the charge in decentralized finance?
Yes, there is. In fact, about a year ago, most of the world's major institutions considered decentralized finance as rat poison and kryptonite and a bubble and would never survive. And every single major bank in the world has now got exploratory initiatives within the DeFi world. Those who make the first profits will find a whole bunch of other smaller banks trying to collaborate with them, understand what they're doing, and offering the same sort of services. So there is scope for collaboration at that level, and also the major banking institutions will get together and form global policies around decentralized finance.
Simon, a lot of people may have heard around about NFTs, probably last year, March 2021. How do NFTs and decentralized finance fit in?
That's a great question, Nastasha. And I think one of the things I've been finding so remarkable over the last year is this very visceral negative response that a lot of people have to NFTs, just completely misunderstanding what's happening here. So in a nutshell, NFT stands for non-fungible token. It really is a crypto asset that represents your ownership of something unique. That thing could be a work of art. It could be a physical item in the real world. It could be a membership to a club. It could be a ticket to a concert. But unlike in the old world, where all of the things I've just mentioned were pretty easy to forge, with the power of cryptography and public key cryptography, you're now able to have concert tickets that can't be copied. You're able to prove provenance of art in a way that would be very difficult to counterfeit. And so this really ushers in a whole new idea around how we activate communities around artists and creators. And we've seen musicians doing amazing things with this, which we don't have time to get into, unfortunately. But I think, to me, that's the thing to pay attention to, is NFTs as part of a way we now organize communities, distributed subcultures, clubs, really show our colors to the world and show our membership in something and get rewarded for it in a way that wasn't possible before.
All right, Stephen, before I let you go, what do you hope readers will get from this book?
What we try to do is write an accessible book for those people who are intellectually curious but are not technical, who wanted to get a very easy to read and sometimes witty view on this landscape, how it works, how it started, what the chronology is, who are the important players, what the important projects are. By the time they finish reading the book, they should have a full understanding of DeFi at a reasonably deep level without going into the technology and too much of the jargon.